the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
All right, everyone. Happy Thursday. It's March 4th, 2021. I hope you are having a magnificent week. I know this week is literally almost over. For those tuning in, we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thanks so much for tuning in. So before we get started on today's show, if you have not subscribed, please do so right now. And if you really love our content, please share it. Just hit the share button if you're on LinkedIn and Facebook. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. That way, you know, every time we go live. What a great show we had last night on the Tech Town Square with my co-host Eddie Doyle on how to reform journalism in the era of clickbait and internet. If you haven't seen that, you should go back and watch it. What a lively discussion it was, and what an awesome community the cyber community is, because people came through with some really awesome ideas that we're going to be promoting over the next several weeks to come, folks. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at KnowBe4 and Wistic. So next week, I've got some really cool announcements, but I'll have people joining me on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday right here on the Practitioner Brief. We'll be talking about the stories that impact us the most. My friends from Wistic will be joining me next week, so you don't want to miss that. That's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. March 17th, we have our webinar, Securing the Supply Chain. And with our first story coming up right now, that webinar is more relevant than ever. The link is right below in this post. It's everywhere. Sign up. You won't want to miss it. Chris Roberts is joining me. Gray Myers, who's going to be on later today on the CISO Talk podcast. Me and him are going to be talking a lot about securing the supply chain as well. A very big and important topic, simply because we're starting to see the weaknesses in the supply chain actively exploited to lead to some massive incidents within organizations. So let's get right into today's show. But before we do that, let's take a sip of coffee. Our coffee drink of the day, my double espresso as usual. And whatever you're drinking, comment, let us know. I kind of like to know what other people drink in the morning. Some people drink cold coffee. Some people drink warm. Some people like just black with no sugar, no cream. Whatever you like. It's your prerogative. Okay, now let's get right into what's happening today. So Qualys, the cybersecurity company, has confirmed an unauthorized access to their data via the Accellion Act. So this comes hours after the Clop ransomware gang published data allegedly stolen from the information security and compliance solution provider. The company has confirmed being impacted by the recent cyber attack involving the Accellion FTA product. Again, we're not going to go into what they should or couldn't have done. Here's the challenge. Right now, Qualys is a cybersecurity company, and like all other organizations, cybersecurity companies can also be victims of cyber attacks. They're not immune to it, just like a doctor isn't immune to being sick. A cybersecurity company isn't immune to being a victim of cyber criminals. The data which was stolen from the company included scan results and financial documents that were published on the Clop Leak Store website this week. And it's data that's being used to essentially further blackmail their victims, which is absolutely and inherently just bad altogether. So the data which was compromised during December of 2020, when Accellion confirmed the attack, with a total of 4 zero-day vulnerabilities that were identified in the attack, all of which have been patched. In a report from several weeks ago, FireEye researchers linked the attack to Fin11 Cybercrime Group, a TA505 spinoff. According to Accellion, the exploited vulnerabilities were of critical severity because they were subject to exploitation via unauthenticated remote control code execution. Following the publishing of the data on Clop's Leaks website, Qualys confirmed the impact, saying that it resulted in unauthorized access to files hosted on the Accellion FTA server. The company also notes that the unauthorized access was limited to the FTA server and that the incident had no impact on Qualys production environments, code base, or customer data hosted on the Qualys cloud platform. So that's really important to note. Qualys goes on to say in a statement, we immediately notified the limited number of customers impacted by this unauthorized access and did not provide any more information or how many people were really impacted by this. But again, this is something that we have to deal with day in and day out in the industry. And I'm sure we'll see more updates come through should there need to be more information share. DHS is ordering all government agencies to either patch or disconnect their Exchange servers. So this comes after earlier this week we reported on the active zero-day vulnerabilities within the Exchange, Microsoft Exchange system. Now, CISO has issued an emergency directive as of Wednesday after Microsoft patched the 4 zero-day Exchange bugs in an emergency out-of-band security update and shared info on an active exploitation in the wild. We're going to get to that in just a minute. The statement here from CISO strongly recommends that all federal agencies to examine their networks to detect malicious activity related to zero-day attacks targeting Exchange servers. CISO asked the agencies to immediately report incidents if any of the following criteria are met: identification of indicators of compromise as outlined in the CISO activity alert, presence of web shellcode on a compromised Exchange on-premise server, unauthorized access or use of accounts, evidence of lateral movements by malicious actors, other indicators of unauthorized access or compromise, other indicators related to this issue to be shared by CISO in the activity alert. This was obviously posted all over. This has now been attributed to China. The people who are actively doing this are of Chinese origin, predominantly state-sponsored threat actors from China, which leads us to our next story where multiple cyberspy groups are targeting the Microsoft Exchange servers via the zero-day flaw, where over 300 web shells that have been identified on the compromised servers, meaning the Chinese have been taking advantage of this for quite some time. The issues with CVE 2021-26855, 26857, 26858, and 27065, which Microsoft addressed this week and are urging immediate patching, have been attributed to the hacking group Hafnium, which has been exploiting vulnerabilities in limited targeted attacks. These are very, very targeted attacks, folks. They're targeting specific organizations. ESET has said that the telemetry shows that at least CVE 2021-26855 is actively exploited in the wild by several cyber espionage group. Among them, they've identified Lucky Mouse, Tick, Calypso, and a few additional yet unclassified clusters. The company also revealed while most of the targets are located in the US, attacks against servers in the EU, Asia, and the Middle East have been identified as well. The results were aimed at government organizations, law firm, medical facilities, and private companies. Organizations can determine whether they might have been compromised by looking in the inet pub www.root.aspnet underscore client system-web for any ASPX files with names such as shell, support with a 0 and not a O, ASPNet underscore client, and others for other random file names in the system web subdirectory. Managed detection and response provider Huntress says it has already observed more than 200 compromised Exchange servers that received payloads within that same directory, claiming to have identified more than 350 web shells to date. An approximate analysis of 2,000 Exchange servers has revealed that roughly 400 of them were vulnerable, with an additional 100 potentially vulnerable as well. So these need to be addressed. This has to be patched if you're on an Exchange system. You want to get this done. The risk here is obviously imminent. The impact is going to be discovered over the next several weeks and months as more organizations come out with announcements that they've been victims to these zero-day attacks. And furthermore, you're going to look at the mitigation, which is a simple patch to get done. It's, I'm never the one to stop business operations for a little bit to do a patch, but if that's what's needed here, then that's what needs to get done. Let's get it done, folks. So our final story of the day is the Amazon code bombs here that target Amazon, Lyft, Slack, and Zillow. So according to researchers, have spotted malicious packages targeting internal applications for Amazon, Lyft, Slack, and Zillow, among many others, inside the NPM public code repository, all of which exfiltrates sensitive information. The package weaponized a proof of concept code dependency confusion exploit that was recently devised by security researcher Alex Berzin to inject rogue code into developer projects. The internal developer projects typically use standard trusted code dependencies that are housed in private repositories. Burson decided to see what would happen if he created copycat packages to be housed instead in public repositories like the NPM with the same names as the private legitimate code dependencies. So in Burzen's case, he tested this dependency confusion using benign POC code blocks that were uploaded to public repository, and he simply sat back and waited to see if they would be imported. His hunch was correct, demonstrating how outside code can be imported and propagated through a targeted company's internal applications and systems with fairly relative ease, including at other major organizations. In all, he received more than $130,000 in bug bounties and pre-approved financial arrangements with targeted organizations from the experiment, who all had agreed to be tested. This has spawned legions of copycat bounty hunters looking to reap a payday. There were 275 such packages uploaded to the NPM repositories within 48 hours of Burzen's research being published, something that we need to address immediately. So when we talk about supply chain and we talk about DevOps, code bombs, like what we saw happen in the case of SolarWinds, are going to continue to be a significant threat, especially within repositories. So the time has come for us to really start to build out a DevSecOps program and really try to build a partnership with companies like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and others on the idea of how do we create secure supported code that is transparent and creates a level of zero trust. And I know I said a buzzword here, so some people may love it, some people will not. But how do we do that? And I don't know that I have the answer for it right now, but I do know that the fact that this has been weaponized, and from that moment, 275 others have jumped on board of this, essentially means that now the essentially Wild West in that aspect is open and needs to be addressed. And I'll be looking to produce a little bit more content on that in the coming weeks. That's it for our practitioner brief today, folks. Later today on the CISO Talk podcast, if you haven't subscribed, please go and do so now. Gray Myers will be joining me tomorrow. Tech Corner is going to be live with my buddy Eric Crone at 11 a.m. right here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We're going to have a awesome conversation, so you'll want to tune into our first live Tech Corner tomorrow. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe right now. We'll be back with a lot more then. Until then, folks, enjoy the rest of your Thursday today. Tomorrow's Friday, and we'll be back then. Until then, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.